have to say it's pretty tough being a film critic in today's world because as much fun as it is to watch movies and review them, it's hard to find the time to do it with a full-time job and life responsibilities. But when you're passionate about something, you'll find time for it. My next guest's bio reads something like mine: husband, father, ex-salesperson, movie nut. He writes with his critic partner, Eddie Pasa, for DC Filmdom. Michael Parsons, thank you for coming on and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I always like to start at the beginning. When did you first fall in love with film?
Well, I think, like with most critics, probably, it was when I was a kid, just a film-obsessed kid, growing up with touchstone films like Star Wars and Halloween and other films like that, Jaws. I feel like our generation was really spoiled with that type of, a lot of films that really set the sort of the gold standard for movies now, for contemporary cinema. So I was a big writer as a kid in school, all through high school, and I sort of became really fascinated with the writing aspect of films, particularly horror films of the 80s. I kind of grew up, and I think probably to a worrisome extent to my parents at some point, the amount of horror films that I absorbed over the course, probably at an inappropriate age for somebody like me.
I was gonna say, was it like, were you sneaking, watching the VHS back then?
Yeah, I had a lot of, the top-loading Betamax and all that. I had a lot of friends and neighbors who I was friends with whose parents were a lot more lenient with what we watched than my folks. They were pretty strict, but I managed to figure it out.
Right.
And so that was really my kind of introduction to film. I think I learned early a lot about that genre in particular, but overall, movies in general. I just love movies, and I was the type of kid that became friends with people like that too, that appreciated films and really liked to check out all types of different movies and a lot of strange, B movies. I mean, that sort of goes hand in hand with horror, particularly in the 80s.
Right.
That was it. I think that's where it really just naturally, happened.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you said you kind of gravitate towards those type of people. There was a buddy of mine, I'm digressing for a second, and once we were in high school, we were old enough to check out movies, Blockbuster. We would always, like, if I go to spend the night over at his place or vice versa, we would always go find the most obscure horror film, watch it and laugh and just critique it, whatever. So shout out to Joe Geibler. All right, how did you get into film criticism?
Well, I've only been in criticism for the last three and a half years. Actually, Dean Rogers, who's here today, sort of gave me a chance to get into that world, to break into the world of criticism, which had been something I'd really actually wanted to do for a while. But I was kind of, I had a career and things like that, and never really pursued that. But I felt like the writer in me always wanted to write about films. I really wanted to pursue screenwriting, but film criticism seemed like a really good sort of gateway to that, and just being able to write how I felt about movies. It's like an infinite sort of there are infinite possibilities in that medium as far as what you can sort of draw from a film, and I like looking at different aspects of movies. And so Dean gave me that chance, and actually Eddie Pasa, my co-writer, was writing for him at the time, and that's sort of how we all hooked up. And then Eddie and I subsequently started our site DC Filmdom, which initially was actually called Papa Reviews, with Pasa Parsons, but we felt like that wasn't really befitting a movie review site. It was a little too clever, gimmicky, but not very, it didn't really have you didn't really understand that it was for film criticism.
Okay.
So here we are.
So with DC Filmdom, how did you all come up with the title? And I'm sure, like so many times, you probably get Google searches and people think it's probably like DC Comics or something.
Yeah, it took longer than you'd think to come up. We're like, okay, it's a movie review site. There are so many combinations of words that we could use, but we wanted it to be, like everybody does, I'm sure, wanted it to really sort of capture, we're DC film critics, but it's also, it's not limited to DC, but we are DC critics. Mm-hmm. The name just kind of came up with the help of a few people, including Eddie's wife and my wife and our site designer and all that. And it just kind of came up, and that name kept coming up, and we said, let's just do that. But there was a thing about the logo that looked kind of like, that DC Comics look almost, that we were like, we didn't want to restrict our audience to people that thought it was strictly for a certain type of genre or something like that. But it seems to have worked out pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I love the new site, by the way. It looks great.
Thank you very much.
All right. So a lot of times people, they always come up to me and they're like, oh, so you just watch movies, and they think it's such an easy, job. Let's talk a little bit about the difficulties. Like, as I said before, we both, are fathers. Why is it that we like, how do we
do this to ourselves?
Yeah, like
why don't we just watch the movies and enjoy them? And not,
exactly.
Yeah, it can be tough with a screaming 2-year-old in the back trying to figure out how to critique somebody's passionate, somebody's work that they've taken 6 months to create this thing, and then you want to be, I find a lot of the hurdles are in the language that I want to use to really get across my unique opinion about something that is not going to inevitably be the same thing that 2,500 other critics are saying. And so I do find myself thinking a lot about, am I, making sure I know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm critiquing something specific about a movie.
Right.
I do get stuck sometimes trying to do that, and you figure it shouldn't be that tough because you have the material right there. You have, somebody else has written the movie. All you have to do is write about their movie. But I find that coming up with original ways to talk about a movie, but also make sure that you're clearly getting your point across it can be a little tricky.
Right. And I think what you're really kind of hitting at is finding your voice, which I know for myself, like I try to write in such a way, because, I've gone to film school, I've studied the theory and all this kind of stuff. But honestly, like sometimes when I look at Rotten Tomatoes, I'm like, why do I have to get a dictionary to understand what the 2, sentence preview of your review is? It's just just find your voice and like talk to me, but don't talk to me and try to tell me that you're so smart. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not hating on anybody.
People get a little erudite with the way that they try to communicate that, and it's it can get. I mean, sometimes that's just the way people talk, but yeah, it can get. Just what's it about? You want to talk to people, a broad audience about the movie.
Right.
And, concisely, pretty much. I like to use big words every once in a while, but I certainly don't. Is nice. I don't do the thesaurus hunt to make sure I'm using fancy words. But
right.
But it's great, isn't it? I mean, it is a fun thing to do, and we're fortunate to be able to do it. That's for sure.
Right. So you and we both had the pleasure of serving as judges with the Indie Capital Awards, which just took place, as you know, but for our audience, it was the first annual Indie Capital Awards. It happened in D.C., and it was just a chance to honor independent filmmakers as well as independent films in the area. So Michael and we served as judges. Let's talk about the experience. I mean, we saw a lot of great films, right?
We really did. That was a lot of fun. What do you think, about 30 films, maybe? Was it more than that?
Probably.
Yeah.
That was a lot. I mean, between the shorts and the features.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Holed up in the basement, watching them, making sure to, absorb them properly.
Right.
There were some really good movies. Suffering Cassandra.
Yes.
Roberto Carmona won Best Director. That was a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I totally enjoyed it. And, one of the things that I love about independent films is it's just the art, you know what I mean? Like, you're doing it low budget. You just got to make it happen. And so many times there's so many, creative roadblocks they just tossed out the window because, like, it's your film. You want to make the best film you can. There's no studio behind it. And like you said, there was a lot of gems that came out of the Indie Caps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you all actually with DC Filmdom, just to give a little plug, you guys reviewed a few of the films, correct?
We did. We were covering actually 2 film festivals at the same time. We were covering the Real Independent Film Extravaganza, Anthony Green's project, and we were also covering the Spooky Movie Festival, which was running at AFI pretty much exactly at the same time. So we reviewed, I think, a total of 14 or 15 films between the 2 festivals. And there were some great movies in there.
Wow.
Like I said, I really liked Suffering Cassandra from Rife, the Independent Festival. And Eduardo Sanchez's Exists played at the Spooky Fest.
Okay.
Blair Witch director Eduardo Sanchez's new film Exists, which is, if you know, for horror buffs, it's going to be a must for them. But it was a fantastic movie.
Nice.
Yeah, that was the found footage Bigfoot picture. And there were two of them in the last. There was Bobcat Goldthwait's Bigfoot picture last year. Willow Creek was also at Spooky Movie. And you figure how many found footage Bigfoot movies can there be in a year? But they were both actually pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to check that out. What's some of the advice that you would give for young critics that are trying to come up, get into the game? What's some of the advice you'd give?
Watch a lot of movies, because I feel like that's, when it comes down to it, that's really the education, is to have reference points and be able to understand certain things. You know, and speak, you know, right from your heart. Make sure that at least that's what you're, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of movie it is. You either like it or you don't. There are things you like about it, things you don't like about it. And just be honest about that when you're writing. But it's, you know, the more movies you see, you know, I want to go through the Ebert's, you know, I think it's 500 movies you should see or something like that. It might be 1,000, I'm not sure. It's a lot. And so I'm going to try to get through that book. But, you know, I'm not one of those guys that in school, I didn't go to film school. I took some film classes. In the brief period I was in college, I took some acting classes, but I never really pursued it in school. And then I had a career. So I really, that was my education, was watching films. And, you know, that education to me never ends because they keep coming out and you keep watching them. And, you know, I think that's it.
So just right now, you know, we're headed into awards season. I don't know about you, but I started to get, I guess, I got a couple of DVDs from Sony Classic Pictures,
those are the only two that I've gotten so far.
Yeah.
How about you? Have you gotten,
Yeah,
you didn't
that's
get your
it,
big
that's
Magnolia
it.
package
No.
yet? I'm waiting for that one because that's always like 30 movies in one pack.
Right. So what do you think are, you know, some of the good movies that are either out now or like heading into awards season that you're excited about?
Well, of course, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar is
Definitely.
going to grab everybody's attention, certainly. You know, Nolan, Dark Knight, Inception, you know, just a fantastic director. I think probably Foxcatcher, that Channing Tatum, Steve Carell movie, is going to be up there. And, you know, as far as films that have been out, like, you know, there's Boyhood, which actually I have yet to see.
Yeah.
I've yet to see that, I'm admitting here on camera as a film critic. It's just one of the ones that slipped through the cracks, but I think that is probably Richard Linklater's sort of magnum opus, I guess.
Right, exactly.
That one will be up there. I think it's going to be a good season. You know, it's going to be just a good, last year was terrific. I think this year might be even better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, where can people reach out, find you if they want, read your reviews?
Well, we are Eddie Pasa, my co-writer and co-founder, and I are at www.dcfilmdom.com. We have reviews up every week. We like to balance, you know, mainstream films. We see, you know, as many mainstream films as we can between the two of us, having kids and when, you know, getting out to screenings, and you know how it is. I mean, I think the majority of us probably know how that is.
Exactly.
So yes, we like to balance. Like I said, we just came off just a slew of festival reviews, pretty much on a daily basis for the last week and a half.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. It was just sort of autopilot mode, but you know, just getting into it and digging in. But and just reviewed Fury last week, which I thought was fantastic. I don't know if everybody shares that opinion, but I thought it was one of the best war movies in a long time. Wow. But dcfilmdom.com is where you can find us. Basically, two guys who are very like-minded. You know, we formed it because we see eye to eye about a lot of films, but in our reviews we approach them very differently. You know, so even if we agree on a film, Eddie is very good at seeing technical aspects of films. I sometimes analyze story differently, and so that's what we wanted to do, was just two guys, two friends that to create a site where people can come and hopefully enjoy reading our reviews and agree with us enough times to come back.
Right.
So,
Awesome. Well, Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
thank you, Kevin.
Man.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we'll take a short break and be back with Dean Rogers, founder of the Rogers Review. Stay tuned.